So no, I don't trust Fox News any more than I trust New York Times, although the New York Times in my limited recent experience has been exponentially worse than the Fox News, but Fox News has been pretty bad. I can call them out too. So no, it's not because someone thinks is my ally in the media world, ideological ally, which they're not. It's not because they now say something to them. Oh, well, hey, it fits my narrative, I'm going to believe it. That's not how it works. And so let's just actually go to, you got to go read both sides. And who do you trust? I trust no one. I'm just going to go assess based on my own insight, based on my own reaction reflexes. If we go to, here we go, Russia, Telegram. I've heard what Fox News said. I read their analysis based on satellite imagery. I've seen other videos. I've read people's tweets. I then go to Russian MFA, which I believe is the official ministry. It's a blue check mark. It's right here. Let me just make sure that we're looking at the same thing. So I go to see what Russia has to say about this. Because I'm not going to believe one side and not believe another side based on what anyone perceives to be ideological alignment. That's not how truth or honesty works. This is what Russia says. All the photos published by the Kiev regime, allegedly testifying to some crimes committed by Russian servicemen in Bucha, Kiev, are just another provocation. Now, this might be a translation issue. But when I hear this is in lawsuits, when you hear everyone accusing everyone of bad faith and malicious conduct. Okay, just another provocation. Okay, well, let's see where this goes. During the time the town had been under the control of the Russian armed forces, not a single local resident has suffered from any violent actions. Would I, as a reasonable individual, reasonably cynical, logical, would I believe that in a time of war, because this is a war, in the time of an invasion, because you may think that this is a justified or provoked invasion, it is an invasion nonetheless. Would I believe that in the time of an invasion, in the time of war, that not a single local resident has suffered from any violent action? Would I assume that the Russian military is somehow better, more ethical in its conduct than the Canadian military, than the Canadian police? The answer is no. So I read Russia's response and I say this smells fishy as well. Russian servicemen have delivered and distributed 452 tons of humanitarian aid to civilians in Kiev region. If you're distributing hundreds of tons of humanitarian aid to civilians, it's because bad stuff is happening. But would I be inclined to believe that in all of an occupation, an invasion, at any point in an actual war, that there would not a single resident has suffered from any violent action? Skeptical. And so now I'm sitting here, you're saying you don't believe anything, Viva. I don't believe anything anybody says on its face. And if that's a problem, I don't think it is. I think what the biggest problem is that we can't trust anyone anymore. You can have more faith in some because they've historically been less deceitful or have a better track record. But we now live in a world where the most venerable institutions that we once relied on for truth, objectivity, and insight, we now know that we can't trust them. From governments across the world to media across the world. And yes, by the way, people, I'm going to keep that one up just in case I want to come back to that. I do include myself in that. Nobody should trust the information that I put out there on its face. I think I've built up a history of responsible analysis, responsible breakdowns, responsible content. I think I've made some mistakes, somewhat, not very serious mistakes. There was one about the Kinder Egg that I made a mistake about. Never forgot about that one. I made the mistake about calling that conservative politician liberal, which might have impacted the way people perceived my interpretation of that event. Her name was Raquel Doncho. What other mistakes did I have to correct? Something about PewDiePie. I forget what it was. But I think I've I don't expect anybody to trust me, and I think you'd actually be somewhat reckless just to rely on things that I said without verifying them yourself. But I do think that I've built a more credible history of both integrity and honesty than the New York Times. So if you're going to trust someone or place more trust in someone, I think I've earned it over the New York Times. But now you look to the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Who else is there? You can't trust any of them. You can't trust your politicians, and you can't trust the internet. So you're being bombarded with information, and you have to go out and interpret it in light of your own capabilities, in light of your own underlying knowledge. You have to go inform yourself, and then you've got to come to the best possible conclusion that you come to, which is necessarily going to be an imperfect conclusion regardless. Sorry, hold on one second. Why would Russia go in light, protect civilian infrastructure, open humanitarian corridors, and the cost of Russian lives to do Bucha? Well, you're asking the why. Look, the arguments are going to be on one side and the other. The arguments are going to be, in war, people do terrible things. You know, like why would, I don't want to draw any analogies because it just confuses things. But in war, people do bad things. Period. War is hell, and in war, people do bad things. Why would they go? It can go from anywhere from calculated, deliberate, to a rogue unit, to an act of aggression, to false flag. It can be any one of the four interpretations. Why would they? One thing is, why would they be invading in the first place? And do you expect that when you're invading a country, even if you do argue or do believe that it's for preemptive, protective reasons, because they shouldn't be doing what they're doing to the civilians in those populations, or they shouldn't have certain research facilities on their property, which you deem to be an existential threat, you're going to do that. You're going to invade. You're going to bomb. You're going to shoot. It's going to happen. So, if I'm weighing the explanations, I would have a lot of questions about the affirmations made by the Russian military. Do I ever believe that in the time of war, any military is going to admit to having done something wrong or to having had even incidental casualties? No. The first casualty of war is truth. And we're seeing it on both sides. You have on both sides, both extremes. One is saying, we're angels, we didn't do anything, we're bringing aid. The other saying, worse than Hitler. Literally, Zelensky is saying that the Russians are worse than the Nazis in what they're doing. So you have, and then it's somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle, you have all the spectrum of possibilities. The latest news was apparently a nitric acid tank being bombed in Ukraine. One side says it's a deliberate attack in order to, equivalent to biological, weapons. I haven't heard what the Russian explanation for this particular incident, this alleged incident was, but, knowing what we know and knowing how the world works, this could be any one of 5 possibilities on a spectrum. It either just didn't happen, like the ghost of Kiev, or because you see footage, it did happen, but not necessarily in this context or even in this year. Or it did happen, I guess there's going to be 6. Or it did happen, the Russians did it, they did it on purpose for the reasons stated. Or it did happen, the Russians did it, it was an accident, they didn't know what they were targeting, or they targeted it for other reasons. Or it was a false flag, it was a setup, it was a sabotage, it was an accident that they're trying to blame on somebody else. Or any combination of all of this, and Lord, leave it up to the individual to try to determine the truth. I got to that one. That was number 5. I was leaving. And hold on, let me just see this here. Was hoping to trust you, Viva, for honest takes and information, but Kevin Newman said your videos got pulled for misinformation. Oh, they're stealth edit to that. Like, way to admit you made a mistake and then just show that you don't have the integrity just to apologize. Just to apologize so that other equally disingenuous or even more dishonest outlets don't say, oh, I saw it on a W5, but I didn't see the correction. Or it's a false flag. And then you hypothesize. You even suggest something could be a false flag, convenient timing, opportunity, all of the stuff. And you're looked at like people are going to discredit you and they're going to call you names as though false flags are not 600 years old. The name of, I don't want to pretend that this was, I did know the false flag originated by, I believe it was pirates flying a friendly flag in order to approach ships closer before carrying out an act of hostility. Had they flown their original flag, they would have known they were enemies. So you carry a false flag, looks like you're allies, get close enough, and they're like, oh, we tricked you. But like you hypothesize that something might have been a false flag, and it's like people think They treat you like the AJs because New York Times didn't say it was a false flag. As if they haven't happened over and over and over again. Let me just go to, don't trust me, by the way. Again, don't trust me. False flags. What are they? And where have they been used? This is from BBC People.